Yarden Ellis stood in the center of aisle 4 at the 24-hour grocery store, gently rocking his sleeping daughter in the crook of his arm while trying to figure out whether the off-brand baby formula was worth the extra $2 he didn't have. "Come on, Daisy," he whispered to the tiny bundle curled against his chest, her breathing soft and steady against his collarbone. "You couldn't have held off one more week before needing a new can." He rubbed his hand gently over her back, feeling her little fingers curl tighter into the collar of his worn flannel shirt. The store lights buzzed faintly above, and his boots squeaked against the linoleum as he shifted his weight to keep her asleep. He didn't notice the woman in heels watching him from the end of the aisle until she cleared her throat softly, like she didn't want to interrupt a moment that wasn't hers. "Sorry," she said as she stepped closer. "I didn't mean to stare, it's just, you're doing that like a pro." Yarden turned, eyes landing on the woman in a sleek navy coat that probably cost more than his rent. Her dark hair was tucked behind one ear, and her face was fresh, no makeup, but still looked like a magazine cover. Her cart held only organic baby food, imported water, and diapers from a brand he'd only seen advertised in magazines at the clinic. "I've had practice," he said with a tired smile, bouncing Daisy gently. "Single dad, this one's got me trained." The woman chuckled, and something in her voice made his chest feel a little less hollow. "My name's Marlowe Zane," she said, offering a hand. "Yarden." "Ellis," he replied, shaking it carefully so he didn't jostle Daisy. "You shopping for yours?" Marlowe nodded and glanced into her cart. "My son Drew, he's teething. Hasn't slept in 3 nights, and apparently the only thing he'll eat right now is this weird puree that smells like cardboard." Yarden laughed, and the sound startled Daisy, who shifted with a tiny whimper. He hushed her instinctively, pressing a kiss to her soft hair. Marlowe watched him quietly. It was the way he moved, the way he held his daughter like nothing else in the world mattered. It hit her in a place she hadn't expected, somewhere between her ribs and her heart. "You know." She hesitated. "There's a cafe across the street. They're open late." "If you're not in a rush, maybe we could." "I'd like that," he said before she could finish. They sat at a corner table in the cafe 15 minutes later. Daisy was asleep in her stroller, and Drew, an energetic 10-month-old with wild curls, was gnawing on a teething ring while Marlowe sipped a chamomile tea she didn't like but always ordered when she was nervous. Yarden had a black coffee, no sugar, and a bagel he didn't touch. "You don't talk like most guys I meet," Marlowe said. "You're calm, real." He raised an eyebrow. "You meet a lot of fake guys," she gave a half laugh. "You'd be surprised. Most people I meet are interested in the wrong things, and if they find out who I am, it usually changes the way they talk to me." He tilted his head. "And who are you?" Marlowe paused. She could have said it right then, told him she was the CEO of Zane Tech, one of the biggest startup investment firms in the country. That she was worth over $3 billion and had been on Forbes' list since she turned 29. But something about his eyes, the way they looked at her like she was just a woman, not a headline, made her want to keep that part to herself. "I'm just a mom," she said instead. "Trying to figure it out one day at a time." He smiled at that. "Then we've got something in common." They met again the next evening, and the one after that. For 2 weeks straight, they found each other in the quiet hours grocery store aisles, late-night coffee shops, walks through the park with their kids bundled in strollers. Yarden didn't ask questions he didn't need answers to. He didn't care where she lived, what car she drove, or what brand her coat was. He just looked at her like she was someone worth knowing, and Marlowe started to feel something she hadn't felt in years seen. One night, as they sat on a bench outside the cafe, Daisy asleep on Yarden's chest and Drew babbling in Marlowe's lap, she asked quietly, "What happened to her mom?" Yarden's jaw tightened slightly, but he didn't look away. "She left when Daisy was 3 weeks old, said she wasn't ready for this. I begged her to stay, but she didn't want a life with bills and diapers and no sleep." Marlowe blinked, her heart squeezing. "Sometimes I wonder if I'm doing any of this right," he murmured. "But then Daisy looks at me like I'm her whole world, and I think, maybe I don't have to be perfect. Just present." Marlowe reached out, resting her hand gently on his. "You're more than present, Yarden. You're incredible." He looked at her, then really looked, and something shifted between them. The air felt heavier, the world quieter. Her fingers stayed wrapped in his far longer than they needed to. The next day, Yarden showed up at the park with a second coffee and a blue pacifier that matched Drew's jacket. "For your teething warrior," he said. Marlowe laughed, and it felt too easy, too warm. "You know," she said, watching him settle Daisy in the stroller, "you're kind of amazing," he shrugged. "I'm just doing what I can." "Well," she said, stepping closer, "what you can is more than most ever do." And before she could second-guess it, she leaned forward and kissed him soft and uncertain but very real. Yarden froze for a second and then kissed her back like he'd been waiting his whole life for that exact moment. When they pulled apart, they both looked a little dazed. "I wasn't expecting that," he breathed. "Me neither," she whispered, her cheeks flushed. "But I don't regret it." Neither did he. What neither of them knew was that everything was about to change because someone had just snapped a photo of them from across the street. And by morning, the headline would be everywhere. "Billionaire tech heiress Marlowe Zane spotted with mystery single dad, who is he?" And that's when Yarden would find out the woman he was falling for wasn't just a mom with a beautiful smile, she was one of the richest women in the world. Yarden stood outside the corner laundromat with Daisy strapped to his chest in her carrier, her tiny hands peeking out of the fleece sleeves as she slept soundly against him. He didn't know why he'd come here instead of heading straight home. Maybe he needed a minute to breathe. Maybe he was trying to convince himself that the headline plastered across the newsstand outside the gas station wasn't real. But there it was, printed in bold black letters on the front of a glossy tabloid. "Marlowe Zane, billionaire mom, seen getting cozy with mystery man." He didn't need to flip the paper over. He didn't need to read the article. The picture told him everything, Marlowe's hand in his. Her leaning close, eyes soft, Daisy's stroller beside them. A moment that had felt private, sacred, stolen, and held like it belonged only to them now blown wide open for the world to dissect. A cold wind swept through the street, and he adjusted the blanket around Daisy's legs. She stirred slightly but didn't wake. He should have seen it. The way she always paid in cash, the driver waiting half a block down the night it rained, the way she never let him walk her home. "Yarden," he turned at the sound of her voice. Marlowe stood a few feet away, her coat clutched in one hand, the other holding Drew close against her hip. Her face was pale, eyes wide with something between fear and something deeper, something that looked an awful lot like regret. "I was hoping I'd find you here," she said, stepping closer. "You weren't answering. I saw." She flinched like the words hit her square in the chest. "I didn't plan for that photo to happen," she said quickly. "We weren't supposed to be seen like that, not because of you, because of everything else. You lied." His voice wasn't angry, that somehow made it worse. "I didn't lie," she said, her voice quiet but steady. "I omitted." "It's not the same," he raised an eyebrow. "You told me you were just a mom." "I am," she insisted. "I'm also a CEO, and the daughter of a man who built a tech empire from nothing and left it to me with more expectations than air. But none of that changes the way I felt when I was with you." Yarden looked down, brushing Daisy's hair back from her forehead. She was still asleep, blissfully unaware that her world had just shifted. "I don't belong in your world, Marlowe." She stepped forward, her voice firm now. "And I don't belong in the one that thinks I have to marry a hedge fund clone just to be taken seriously. I don't care about what I'm supposed to do. I care about what's real." He looked up at her then, eyes searching hers like they could find the truth between the lines. "You have a board of directors, a mansion, a life that runs on appointments and assistants. I have a leaking roof and 2 shifts at the mechanic's shop just to keep the lights on. Do you think I care if your roof leaks?" she asked, her chin lifting. "Do you think Drew and I need another penthouse? I've built empires, Yarden. The only thing I've never had is someone who looked at me like I was more than a number." He hesitated. "You should have told me." "I know," she said, voice softer. "I was afraid. Afraid that the second I did, you'd look at me differently. That I'd lose you before I even had a chance to find out if this," she gestured between them, "was real." He didn't speak for a long moment, then, "So what now?" Marlowe glanced down at Drew, who had fallen asleep against her chest. She shifted her weight, then met Yarden's eyes again. "I don't have all the answers, but I know I don't want to walk away, not unless you tell me to." Yarden looked at her, not her name, not her bank account, just her, and still something in him pulled back. I need time, he said finally. Not for me, for Daisy. I can't bring someone into her world unless I know it's solid. Marlowe nodded slowly. Then I'll wait, as long as it takes. She turned to leave, then paused. Yarden, she asked, not turning around. Yeah. I didn't fall for you because you held Daisy like the world might break if you didn't. I fell for you because you made me feel like I didn't have to pretend, not for 1 second. She walked away then, disappearing down the street with Drew in her arms. Yarden stayed there until the city lights blurred and his coffee from earlier had long gone cold. He didn't know what to think, but he knew what he felt, and it was terrifying. The next morning, his phone buzzed with a voicemail from a number he didn't recognize. He pressed play. Mr. Ellis, this is Amelia Brookstone. I'm Marlowe Zane's personal assistant. She asked me to reach out and let you know that she's canceled all her public appearances for the next 2 weeks. She said to tell you that she's not running. Not from the press and not from you. He deleted the message before Daisy could wake up, but the words stayed rooted in his mind all day. Later that week, he walked into the repair shop where he worked and found a delivery man standing by the front counter with a long, narrow package. Yarden Ellis, the man asked. Yeah, the man handed over a padded case and a crisp envelope with his name written in smooth, precise handwriting. Inside the case was a rare torque wrench, set the kind they didn't even stock in most tool catalogs. The kind he'd once admired in a magazine and then pretended he hadn't. He opened the envelope, bracing himself. No note, just a small card with one line. For the man who fixes things with his hands and his heart. There was no signature, but he knew. He stood there in the middle of the shop, grease on his hands, Daisy asleep in her carrier against his chest, and something inside him cracked open. She wasn't running. And now he wasn't sure he wanted her to. Yarden tugged the sleeves of his work jacket down as he stood in front of the narrow window of his apartment, watching the sky shift from charcoal to pale ash. The city was waking up, but he hadn't slept, not after the package. Not after the words that had burrowed into his chest and refused to leave. Daisy let out a soft coo from the borrowed bassinet in the corner. He crossed the room and picked her up, holding her against him with practiced ease. Her cheek pressed to his shoulder, warm and trusting, and for a second he just breathed her in. He set her down in her carrier and reached for the envelope again. No name, no return address, just that one line. He hadn't known what to do with it then, and he still didn't now. But the wrench sat on the counter beside a chipped mug, and every time he looked at it, something shifted in his chest. Later that afternoon, he found himself outside a building he'd never thought he'd walk into. A glass tower that caught the sunlight like it had swallowed every star in the city. The security guard inside gave him a once-over, then buzzed someone on the line. She said to send you up, the guard muttered, surprised but too professional to question it further. The elevator doors opened to silence and white marble. He stepped out into a hallway that didn't smell like oil and rubber and old coffee, but like something expensive and soft he didn't know how to name. Then she appeared. Marlowe stepped out of a glass-walled office, her hair pulled back, a navy blouse tucked into gray slacks, no jewelry, no makeup, just her. She looked like someone who made decisions that moved markets, but when her eyes met his, all of that fell away. You came, she said, her voice calm but uneven at the edges. I didn't plan to, he replied, stepping forward, but I couldn't stop thinking about what you said. She tilted her head. Which part? That you weren't pretending, that this, whatever it is. It's real. She didn't say anything, just watched him like she was afraid breathing too hard might make him vanish. I didn't know how to respond to the gift, he added, but it mattered, not because of what it cost, because of what it said. I didn't want to push you, she said carefully. I just wanted you to know I see you. He nodded slowly, hands in his pockets. I've spent the last 3 years wondering if anyone ever would. They stood in silence for a moment, the city humming beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows. I don't have the luxury of risking Daisy's stability, he said. I don't bring people into her life unless I know they're gonna stay. I'm not going anywhere. That's easy to say in a glass tower, he said, his voice quiet. But what happens when we're not in cafes and gift boxes? What happens when it's 3 a.m. and she's screaming and I'm 2 paychecks behind and there's no staff to clean up the mess? I clean up my own messes, she said, stepping closer. And I've been up at 3 a.m. enough times to know what exhaustion tastes like. I'm not trying to save you, Yarden. I just want to be beside you. He drew in a breath, slow and measured. I don't know how to be part of your world. Then don't be, she said. Let's make our own. He looked at her then, really looked, past the blouse and the building and the billion-dollar name. He saw the woman who had sat on a cracked bench with teething gel in her bag and worry in her eyes. The woman who kissed him like she didn't care about what it meant tomorrow. You really mean that? He asked. She reached out and took his hand, her grip steady. Yes. But you don't have to decide everything today. He hesitated, then nodded. I want to try for Daisy, for me, for us. She smiled, not the polished kind she gave in press photos, but the one he'd only seen when she was holding Drew and humming off key lullabies in the park. Then come to the gala with me this Friday, he blinked. Gala, it's for the Children's Health Initiative. I'm on the board, she said. You don't have to say anything, just be there with me. I don't own a tux. I'll take care of it. He raised an eyebrow. You're going to dress me now. I'm going to make sure you don't look like you just spent 6 hours under a car hood, she said, and he laughed for the first time all week. I'll think about it. Do more than think, Yarden, she said, her voice lower now. Let me show you what it's like when someone chooses you. Not because they pity you, because they see everything you are and they still want more. He left without another word, Daisy's carrier in one hand, the weight of possibility in the other. By Friday night, he stood outside a private venue that looked like something out of a dream. Men in tailored suits, women in gowns that shimmered like moonlight. He shifted his weight, tugged at the unfamiliar collar of the suit that had arrived in a box wrapped in navy ribbon, exactly his size. Then he saw her. Marlowe descended the steps like she wasn't walking like the world tilted to make space for her. Her dress was cream, simple, but so perfectly cut it looked like it had been crafted just for her. She wasn't wearing diamonds or pearls, just a silver bracelet that caught the light as she reached for his hand. You clean up well, she said. I feel like a fraud, he muttered. You're not, she said firmly. You belong here. Because I do and I choose you. They walked into the ballroom together, hand in hand, and the noise faded like a wave pulling back from the shore. People turned. Whispers flickered. But Yarden didn't care. Because Marlowe Zane, billionaire, board member, mother, and woman who kissed with her entire heart, had just introduced him to a room full of silver spooned elite as hers. And for the first time in years, he didn't feel small. He felt wanted, he felt seen. Yarden adjusted the bow tie again, still too tight, still unfamiliar, but he didn't reach to loosen it this time. Across the marble ballroom, Marlowe was speaking with a woman in a satin blazer, her hand resting lightly on Drew's stroller. The baby blinked up at the chandelier above them, wide-eyed and content. Daisy, in her own stroller beside him, was gnawing on a small plush giraffe and occasionally letting out a delighted squeal whenever the strings quartet shifted tempo. He'd expected the stares tonight, some curious, some disapproving, but what he hadn't expected was how none of it mattered. Not when Marlowe met his eyes across the room and smiled like only he could see her. Not when she excused herself from the conversation and crossed the floor toward him, her heels silent against the polished stone. Come with me, she said, her voice low. I want to show you something. Yarden followed her down a corridor that branched off from the ballroom, passing gold-framed photographs and velvet-draped archways until they reached a set of tall double doors. Marlowe pushed them open to reveal a quiet terrace overlooking the city. The skyline stretched endlessly, dotted with lights that shimmered like stars scattered across concrete. She stepped out first, taking a breath of the crisp air before turning back to him. Do you know what it feels like to build something and never be sure anyone sees it for what it truly is? Yarden leaned on the stone railing beside her, careful not to wake Daisy, who had drifted off again in his arms. I run a neighborhood garage with a flickering sign and a coffee machine older than I am, he said. I know exactly what that feels like. She glanced at him, something breaking open in her expression. I used to think success looked like this, she said, nodding toward the skyline. But lately, I've started wondering if it's not about what you build, but who you build it with. Marlowe reached into her clutch and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. This is for you, she said, handing it over. Don't say anything until you've read it. He unfolded it, eyes scanning the page. It took a moment to register what he was looking at: a signed proposal for a community initiative, a partnership between Zane Tech and a network of local businesses. At the top, Ellis Family Garage. His grip tightened slightly. You want to sponsor the shop? He asked. I want to invest in what you've already built, she said. Not change it, just give it the tools to grow. I didn't ask for this. I know, she said, and I would never offer if I thought it would make you feel small. You once told me you just wanted to be enough for your daughter. What if you already are, and this is just giving her more? He looked down at Daisy's sleeping face, her tiny hand curled against his chest. I've spent years doing everything alone, he said quietly. There were nights I didn't know how we'd make it through the week. Then let me stand beside you, she said. Not because you need saving, but because I love the way you fight for her and for yourself. He blinked, caught off guard. You love me? I do, she said without hesitation. And I know that's messy and complicated and terrifying, but it's also true. He didn't speak for a long moment. Then, do you know what I thought when I saw you in that grocery aisle? Marlowe tilted her head. Tell me. I thought you were too perfect to be real, too polished. Too far from the world I live in. But every day since, you've proven me wrong. You're realer than anyone I've ever met. She stepped closer, her hand resting against his. Then come into my world, not the one with the marble floors and stock portfolios, the one with Drew. With late-night walks and formula runs and lullabies sung off-key. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached into the stroller and carefully handed Daisy to her. She's heavier than she looks, he warned. Marlowe took the baby without hesitation, adjusting her with practiced ease. Daisy stirred, blinking up at her. I don't want you to wait anymore, he said. If you want to build something with me, really build it, I'm all in. Marlowe kissed the top of Daisy's forehead before turning to him. Yarden, he closed the distance between them, brushing her cheek with the back of his fingers. I love you too, he said, and I don't care if the rest of the world thinks a billionaire and a mechanic don't make sense. We do. She reached for his hand, lacing their fingers together. I've been chased by cameras, cornered in boardrooms, and held to standards that didn't leave room for mistakes. But with you, I get to breathe. I get to be just me. They stood there, city lights dancing below, their children quiet between them. Later that week, he walked into the garage to find a new sign being installed above the entrance. Ellis and Zane Family Auto. He didn't ask for it. She didn't ask for permission, but it felt right. And on a quiet Sunday morning, with Daisy babbling in her high chair and Drew throwing cereal from his booster seat, Marlowe turned to him over a chipped ceramic mug and said, I never thought love would look like this. Yarden leaned in, brushing a kiss to her temple. Neither did I. But I wouldn't trade it for anything. And neither of them ever did. The last frost of winter clung to the edges of the city as spring crept forward, quiet but determined. Outside the garage, the air carried the scent of oil and early cherry blossoms, the kind that bloomed too soon and scattered too fast. Inside, Yarden stood under the lifted hood of a vintage Cadillac, the sleeves of his shirt rolled to his elbows, one hand steady on the engine mount while the other adjusted a tensioner bolt with surgical precision. Behind him, the office door creaked open. You're late, he said, not turning. I brought muffins, Marlowe answered, her voice lighter than the last time she'd stepped into the garage. And I called in advance. You just ignored the call. I was busy, he muttered, glancing over his shoulder. She held up a brown paper bag triumphantly. Chocolate chip. And they're still warm. He set the wrench down and wiped his hands on a towel. You bribing me now? Bribing implies I want something. She set the bag on the counter beside the old cash register. I just thought you could use a break. Yarden leaned against the counter, watching her unpack the muffins. She wore jeans and a soft gray sweater, her hair pulled into a loose braid that fell over one shoulder. It was the first Saturday in weeks she hadn't had a board meeting or an investor call. She'd promised today was theirs, and she'd kept her word. Where are the kids? He asked. With my sister. She offered to take them for the afternoon. Said, and I quote, you two need a day where nobody throws applesauce at your face. He chuckled and took a bite of a muffin, then immediately reached for a napkin. Still warm, huh? I said they were warm. Not that they wouldn't burn your entire mouth if you inhaled them like a vacuum cleaner. He grinned, and for a moment, the garage felt like more than a workshop. It felt like a home that had never needed 4 walls and a mortgage to make it real. She leaned back against the counter beside him. I've been thinking. That always sounds dangerous. I want to do something for us. Not the shop, not the company, just us. He raised an eyebrow. You planning a vacation, sort of. She turned toward him. I bought a cabin, upstate, just a few hours away, quiet, secluded. It's not huge, but it's got a lake and a wraparound porch. A cabin, he repeated, for weekends. For holidays, for when the world gets too loud and we just want to be somewhere it doesn't follow us. He studied her for a moment, then nodded. Sounds like something Daisy would love, and Drew, he's obsessed with ducks now. There's a whole family of them on the lake. Let me guess. You already named them. I did, actually, but you'll laugh. I'm already laughing. She nudged him with her elbow. You're lucky you're charming. You're lucky I don't mind muffins that double as flamethrowers. They stood there in easy silence for a few breaths, the kind of silence that didn't need filling. Then she reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Before you say anything, no, I'm not proposing. I'm not sabotaging the whole tradition, but I do want to give you something. He took the box, hesitant, and opened it. Inside was a silver key, simple, unadorned, to the cabin, to everything, she said. The cabin, my home, my life, I want you to have access to every part of it. No locked doors, no lines between us. He closed the box and looked at her, his voice low and steady. I've never had someone give me a key to anything before, not like this. You've always had a key to me, she whispered. This just makes it official. He reached into his back pocket and pulled out his own key. It was scratched, old, and attached to a frayed piece of leather. This is to the garage, and the apartment above it. It's not much, but it's mine, and now it's yours too. She took it like it was made of gold. I don't care what it looks like, she said. I care that you gave it to me. They stood close now, inches apart, the hum of the city muted by the walls around them. You know what scares me the most? He asked. Tell me. That I'll wake up one morning and realize this was never real, that someone like you doesn't really choose someone like me. She stepped into him, her hand resting gently against his chest. I choose you every single day, and I'll keep choosing you, even when it's hard, especially then. He kissed her then, slow and certain, the kind of kiss that didn't need to prove anything. When they pulled apart, her eyes were glassy. I didn't think I'd get this, she said. A life that actually feels like mine. You've got it, he whispered. That night they drove to the cabin. Marlowe carried Drew, who clung to her shoulder sleepily, while Yarden held Daisy, her small hand wrapped around his finger like she never wanted to let go. The porch lights were already on, casting a soft amber glow across the trees. Inside, the fireplace crackled and a thick quilt waited on the couch. They didn't unpack. They didn't rush. They just sank into the couch together, their children nestled between them, the fire casting flickering shadows on the walls, and time, for once, wasn't something chasing them. It was something they had in abundance. In the months that followed, everything settled like it had always been meant to. The garage expanded, the cabin became a sanctuary, and Marlowe learned how to make pancakes without burning them. Yarden taught her how to change a tire. She taught him how to use a calendar app. They argued sometimes. About dishes. About bedtimes. About whether Drew should be allowed to wear a superhero cape to preschool. But their fights always ended in laughter or kisses or both. One morning, with Daisy on his shoulders and Drew dragging a blanket across the hallway, Yarden found Marlowe in the kitchen, humming off key to a song playing from her phone. He walked up behind her, wrapped his arms around her waist, and said, "Marry me." She froze, then turned. Yarden, I know we said no rush, but I don't want to wait, not because I need a title, but because I want to stand in front of the world and say she's it, she's mine. She didn't cry, but her voice broke when she said yes. And when they were married in the backyard of the cabin, birdsong echoing through the trees and their kids throwing flower petals at each other instead of down the aisle, it wasn't about the dress or the rings or the guests, it was about them, a mechanic, a billionaire, 2 babies, 1 love. And that was more than enough. Always would be.